27 days to go. 4 weeks to go. Under 4 weeks. And Rishi Sunak's Conservatives are further behind the Labour Party than when Rishi Sunak called the election. He thought he could do a number, do a runner, do a jump, do a surprise on the opposition parties with the good inflation figures and maybe recapture the narrative that has not come to pass, has it? 4 weeks to go. I'm Ben Walker. This is Britain Elects. I'm a senior data journalist with the New Statesman. Here's a roundup of what's happened and what's not and what's still to come. But yeah, thank you very much for joining us. And if I can possibly turn the volume up, I will. But for the life of me, I don't know how to. But anyway, is that better? Does that turn it up? I'm not even sure. Political genius of our time, I do not know. But anyway, good afternoon. So, Sunak called the election 22 points behind. About a week ago, it was 23 points behind. Now it's 22 points behind again. Okay. The arrival of Nigel Farage on the scene has sent snap polls for reform up 5 points in one poll, according to one pollster, 4 points in other 3 points. Britain Elects finds them up from 11% to 13%. Yeah, and what that actually means is if an election was held now, Nigel Farage would win his Clacton constituency that he only just selected a few short days ago, and around about another 4 dozen Conservative seats would fall from the Conservative hands into Labour or the Liberal Democrats as a consequence of that reform rise. Yeah. Who thought calling this election? Who thought calling this election at this time of the year when so few people are feeling any sort of economic recovery, when so few people are feeling those GDP figures on a television screen, those inflation figures on a television screen? If you're not feeling that, then you're not going to vote for it, are you? You're not voting for a recovery in mind. The best thing the Conservatives could have done, should have done, was leave the election as late as possible, albeit before the US presidential election, because the chaos element of that could really spice things up if they haven't already been spiced up. So there we go. But yeah, let's have a look at the polls, shall we? Let's have a look at what the numbers say. Like I say right now, Labour lead of 22 percentage points. Labour, 44%. Conservative, 22%. That's the Tories down by half on where they were in December 2019. That Get Brexit Done election, all but reversed in dramatic form. Labour, 44%, up only 12 points. Note that the Tories have fallen by 22. Labour are only up by 12. Lib Dems naturally get a little bit squeezed in nationwide opinion polling. They tend to outperform their nationwide figures by a few percentage points, with the exception, I think, of 2010 and indeed 2015. But they're currently on 9%, down 2 on the last election, but we expect that in enough seats, with enough tactical voting, to be honest, those numbers should be bumped up to where they were in 2019. The Greens are on 6%, up 3 percentage points. That would represent the best performance for a Green Party across the United Kingdom since, the 1989 European elections? Yeah. And Reform are currently forecast to get a vote share greater than what UKIP got in 2015. They're on 13.1%, up 11 points on what the Brexit Party got in 2019. But you've got to remember, Reform isn't the Brexit Party. It's the same logo, same structure, same people, but it's where its vote comes from is slightly different. So when you look at places that they did well last time, Hartlepool, Barnsley South, Barnsley Central, it's not going to be the same. It's not going to be the same because 2019 they only stood in certain constituencies on a Get Brexit Done election. It's a different dynamic now. So if you ever see models, if you ever see forecasts pointing to very, very high Reform votes in Barnsley, in Hartlepool, in those seats the Brexit Party did well in, I'm telling you, it's not That's not great modelling, in my view. All right. But yeah, that's the numbers as current. Has anything happened over the course of the campaign? Let's have a look at, where were we? 19th of May. Tories, 23%. Labour, 44%. Where are they now? Really? Nothing has changed. Not to sound like Theresa May here, nothing really has changed. You see that reform bump? Well, that reform bump really came after a reform squeeze. So, again, nothing has changed here. Has any dynamic changed on the granular, in the undercarriage of all the opinion polls? I'm having a think now, actually. And to be honest with you, I'm drawing a blank. I think Wales... I think there's a few question marks over Wales. The furore surrounding Vaughan Gething, I think, could be a bit of a spoiler on Labour's performance across the Welsh constituencies. I don't know by how much. I don't know if at all. I just know that the new Welsh First Minister's numbers aren't great, and they are falling. And his continued, I think, presence as First Minister, if there's no change to his reputation, no change to any image, perception of Welsh Labour after Mark Drakeford, who did quite well a few years ago, I think it could spell some problems down the line for Labour in Wales. Could be the first place where they lose big when they get into government in Westminster. So... that's really the only, I suppose, under the bonnet signs of serious change, perhaps. And that was happening even before the general election was called. The rest of it is reformer backup. They'll probably get a bit better than what our poll tracker says. And that'll be it. But what will that actually mean? What will that mean in seat terms? What will that mean in forecast terms? Well, Britain Predicts, the model which has better form than most for forecasting by-elections, is now being put to test for the big general. And I'm nervous, I'll be honest with you. I'm nervous with what it's showing, what it's saying based on current numbers, but you got to roll with it. I'm not going to hide with it. I'm not going to couch it with 1,000 clarifications, terms and conditions apply. No, you've got to wear it as it is. So current numbers, let's have a look at those, shall we? If an election was held now, emphasis now, last updated today, by the way. If an election was held now, Labour would come away with 455 seats in the House of Commons. That is up 255 on 2019. By the way, these are notional, but these are changes with the notional results of the last election, i.e. on the new boundaries. The Tories would fall to what would be their worst defeats in their history. 86 seats, down 286 seats. The most successful political party in the Western world, allegedly, collapsing, brought to book, put in its place by self-indulgence, a litany of leaders, and it also seems its Prime Minister abandoning the 80th anniversary of D-Day. Reform would be forecast to pick up their first MP on these numbers. 13.1% would get them one MP. Of course, this is all error margin stuff, but yes, the current forecast points to Nigel Farage winning Clacton. We'll look at the actual numbers in a minute. Lib Dems, 65 seats, up 57. This accounts for limited tactical voting. Tactical voting is accounted for in this model, unlike some other models, and that's why you're seeing more and more seats for the Lib Dems, and by extension, more and more seats for the Labour Party. They're up 57 here on 9.4%. And I completely understand when I have Lib Dem organisers getting in touch with me to say these numbers are absolutely rubbish. But I'm also somewhat comforted by the fact that other Lib Dem organisers in seats that they are targeting but aren't talking much about are also getting in touch to say, no one else is saying we are in competition here. Thank you very much. We think we've got this already. So I would look at the number, that's 65 seats for the Lib Dems, and I would say, actually, yeah, they're probably not far off that. Will they reach 65? I don't know. I think that's quite optimistic for them, but they're not far off it. Definitely not far off it. One seat for the Greens right now, that is Brighton Pavilion, not Bristol Central. Bristol Central is a tighter race than it otherwise would be, according to Britain Predicts. We'll look at those numbers in a minute. But in Brighton Pavilion, we still have the Greens on course to hold their seat. Scottish Nationalists, SNP, 20 seats, down 28 there in Scotland. Tactical voting both helps them and hurts them in Scotland. It's not unreasonable to think that they could fall a little bit further as well. There's a lot of races in Scotland coming right down to the wire, and I don't think we talk about that at all, really. Also worth bearing in mind, the current Britain Predicts forecast expects the Conservatives to hold all of their Scottish seats. And it's not unreasonable to think they might be in competition for another one, picking up one from the SNP. But we'll talk about that later. Plaid Cymru, because of boundary changes killing off the over-representation of Wales in the House of Commons, will be on 3 seats. That will be up 1 on the 2 they notionally won last time round. And, of course, Mr. Speaker, Lindsay Hoyle, represents the other, even though other parties take 5% of the vote here. Now, that could be for a smattering of all sorts: Workers' Party, Women's Equality Party, Independents, all sorts. Take your pick, you know, if I don't have a clue, really. But anyway, let's look at these numbers on map form. This is how the country would look if an election was held tomorrow. It's dramatic. If I could show you a map at the same time of how Britain voted in 2019, you'll be in a state of shock, because this is dramatic stuff. Not once do you really expect to see Labour picking up seats like Leek or Uttoxeter, Lichfield, that evaded Labour's grasp in 1997. Most of Northamptonshire and South Northamptonshire currently forecast to go Labour, although note, in seats like these, there's a lot of seats like this, Labour only wins the seat with 29% of the vote. The Conservatives come away with 29% as well, but a little bit less. And Reform eating into that eating into that Tory vote there with an 18 share of the vote here. My God, yes, there's a hell of a lot of seats like that. Goes well to Kings Lynn, North West Norfolk. Not, I note, Liz Truss's seat. That is South West Norfolk. Again, look at that. Labour only winning this seat with 31% of the vote. I think it's fair to say that this probably won't happen. These types of results will not happen, because Labour's rise is not enough to win seats like this. And is the right going to be as split as what we're seeing right now? Well, I'm making a cautious, conservative assumption that it won't be as split as this. And you'll see a bit of that Reform vote returning to apathy, primarily, but some of it also going to the Conservatives, which should allow them to cling on in more than a few dozen seats. But we are at that stage now where you've got to start asking yourself, what if it doesn't? It didn't in Canada in 1993. It could happen here in the United Kingdom as well. But again, this is error margin stuff. Because I just want to return to this. This is 455 Labour, 86 Con. Okay? Now that's, error margin. Within that error margin, you can end up with the Conservatives on 50 seats and the Conservatives on, let's say, 150 seats. That's the error margin. There are more than enough marginals in this country to see, really, if I was a forecaster looking to hedge my bets, looking to cop out, I would say, look, the current forecast is Labour 400 to 480, Conservative 50 to 150, Reform 0 to 3, Lib Dems 40 to 70, and so on and so forth. This is the central forecast of if an election was held now. And some of the results are absolutely ridiculous. Let's zoom in on Clacton-on-Sea in Essex. Reform gain from Conservative. Nigel Farage is in Parliament, or will be in Parliament, if these numbers were borne out in a general election held today. Reform 30%, Conservative 28%, Labour 22%. What's going to happen there? What's going to happen there? Will we now start to see a squeeze on the Labour vote to elect the Conservative? Will we? Who knows? Apparently it happened in South Thanet in 2015. Will it happen here, particularly for this Conservative brand? I doubt it, but never say never when you're not on the ground. Meanwhile, in South Thanet, or what is now East Thanet, which includes Ramsgate, which was South Thanet, Labour are forecast to take the seat quite convincingly, formerly Craig McKinley's seat, with 43% to the Conservatives' 28%. Reform here would come away with 17% of the vote. And you see that as well. The south coast of England changing colours. They haven't really seen since 1997, if not 1945. You have places like Bexhill and Battle going Labour. You have places like Ashford going Labour. You have places like Dover going Labour, needed for a majority if Labour wants to govern this country again. Herne Bay and Sandwich, which is this quite large seat, Herne Bay all the way over to Sandwich here. Again, a Labour gain. A Labour gain not expected. Rochester and Stroud, another hotbed for UKIP in 2014-15. Another Labour gain, but note with 36% of the vote. Let's look at the Greens prospects. Brighton Pavilion, we're starting to see a fall in the Green vote here. 52% forecast, down 5 points on 2019. Labour on 33%, up 10 points here. We need to talk about how I better measure, how tactical voting could work in seats like these. We don't really know. I need to have a look at that. I'm going to probably write about that at a later date. Neighbouring seats. East Worthing, or what should be Worthing East and Worthing West. Look at that. This is East Worthing, and that's Worthing West. It should be Worthing East, but, the boundary commissioners have their own ideas. Worthing East, Labour, 46%, up 9 points. Tories, 28%, down 23. Worthing West, Labour, 40%, up 10. Tories, 31%, down 25 points. How do you come back from that? And that, by the way, is Tim Lawton's seat and Peter Bottomley's seat, isn't it? Isle of Wight. The Isle of Wight. East and West, 2 constituencies now. It's just got a little bit too populated to handle one now. And look at that. Labour gains in both, but on somewhat split votes. Actually, tell a lie. Those are incredibly split votes. And interestingly enough, Labour wins with the exact same share of the vote. Look at that. Isle of Wight West, Labour on 28%, winning against the Conservatives 22%. And then Isle of Wight East, Labour on 28%, against the Conservatives 23%. Oh gosh, is that really going to happen? Who knows? Who knows? And then you come up with some absolutely ridiculous results if an election was held now. Salisbury, Labour gain 27% of the vote here. This is silly. These numbers are silly numbers. And I don't want to pay attention to them because I know they're silly. How probable are they likely to be borne out? I doubt it. But here's one that people do want to pay a lot of attention to. Bristol Central. Labour currently forecast to get 45% of the vote. That is down 13 percentage points. Greens on 35% of the vote, up 9 points. And the Lib Dems on 12%. They didn't stand last time. That looks like it could become quite tight because at the start of this forecasting period, when Rishi did call the election, I'm sure the gap was a bit wider than that. I can't remember where it was, but it was wider. South Cotswolds is looking like a tight Lib Dem fight versus the Conservatives here. Lib Dems 30%, Conservatives 29%. Labour on third there with 15%. Other forecasters that do not account for tactical voting has Labour either second or in a close third. It doesn't have the race like this. This is why you need models which account for tactical voting and models which decide who is the tactical voting option. My model, as I've written before, factors for local factors, i.e., let's go all the way over to Aylesbury here. If you have local strength in the population centre that is more Lib Dem or Labour, it is more likely than not in general elections those progressive voters will go for that party. In Aylesbury constituency, which we have forecast to be a shy Lib Dem gain from the Conservatives, we do have Labour losing vote share here because of squeezage by the Lib Dems on the progressive vote. And the reason for this, the reason Aylesbury has been fingered as the Lib Dem tactical voting option here is because the only body of progressive party strength in this seat is the Lib Dems in Aylesbury. There are no Labour councillors elected in this seat. There's no Labour local strength, i.e. in a local election terms, in this seat. As a consequence, when you decide tactical voting choices, the choice is there. The choice is the Lib Dems. It's a bit different in other places. You go all the way up to here, Chester South and Edisbury. Because you have Labour councillors here in the more built-up bits of the seat, which is the south of Chester, you have the Labour Party being identified as the voting option here. Of course, this isn't a precise model. This isn't a precise way things work, but it's a bit more accurate than uniform swing models seen elsewhere. All right. What else can we look at? My God, this is unexpected. Skipton and Ripon. That's not going to vote Labour. Or it shouldn't. It shouldn't. But this is what the polls imply right now. Pendle and Clitheroe. Labour, 44%, up 12 points. Conservatives, 37%, down 20 points. Yeah, that seems probable. Reform on 11% there. Quite probable. Scotland. I said this before and I'll say it again. The Conservatives are forecast to hold every single one of their seats in Scotland because of, can you guess it? Progressive pro-unionist tactical voting. What you're going to see in seats like Berwickshire, Roxburgh, Selkirk, the whole of the Scottish Borders seats, you're going to see the Labour Party rise not by as much as they otherwise would, because some of their rise is going to the Conservatives, which is keeping them above the water in Con versus Nat contests. Okay, you look at some of these tight seats here, particularly West Aberdeenshire. Right, the Tories are projected to fall 4 points in Scotland in this seat, even though across the whole of Scotland they're projected to fall by what? Is it 10, 15 points? Right. So what you're seeing here is that though Labour are nationally up in Scotland by about 15 points? Yeah, they're only up 8 here. What you're seeing there is some form of tactical voting, which is helping the Conservatives in places like this. And it's not unreasonable to think they might snag another seat, the Scottish Tories. Ayr, Carrick and Cumnock. Who knows? I'm not quite sure, but it is definitely on the list of things to consider. So we have Reform with 1 seat in Clacton. Can they win any other seats? Boston and Skegness looks like a possible here. Right now, Conservative 30%, Reform 28%, Labour 23%. And share for the others of 9% there. Need to have a look in what I'm doing with the other parties. I think I'm just, you're doing a sum of the rest. I think we need to look at that. But anyway, yes, it's not unreasonable to think that Reform could come away with not just one, but multiple members of Parliament, which, by the way, I think qualifies them for funding in Parliament. If you have 1 MP, I don't think you get as much funding as you do with 2. Who knew? But I think it's quite significant for the future sustainability of the Reform Party across the UK. Where else could they win seats? What about South Holland and the Deepings? Yes, another place in which Reform comes second. In the Police and Crime Commissioner elections, by the way, across the Boston area, though the Tories topped the poll here, the Reform Party came a strong second, but they also had the English Democrats standing, or another candidate of similar political leanings. And you added up the English Democrats and Reform, and you do come away with a party of the radical right topping this borough in the Police and Crime Commissioner elections. Okay? That's... So when you look at this model and you think, gosh, if you ever have doubt in it, just bear in mind, this is based on recent elections. This is based on recent election data. And it could see Reform top the poll in Boston and Skegness, giving Richard Tice a seat in the Houses of Parliament. Seats, by the way, that we were writing off as is improbable for Reform only weeks ago. But Nigel Farage's decision to return to frontline politics, a figure more recognisable, more liked by the Conservative base than that which is felt towards Rishi Sunak, things have, in one sense, been turned on their head. Labour are the primary beneficiary, but not entirely. Now, let's just have a look at the overall numbers here. What is happening? This is based on, as of the 3rd of June, Labour lead of 23 points. We know that's now down to 22 points. Labour's lead on the economy is 14 points. Keir Starmer's lead over Rishi Sunak, the Prime Minister, is 11 points. And Keir Starmer's own net approval has seen a slight bump up and sits at 4 points. All positive numbers for a Labour Party on course for a landslide, but not all of these numbers point to a Labour Party on course for a landslide. Because let's not forget, people are giving Labour a landslide not just because they like Labour, but also because they dislike the opposition, the alternatives to Labour. Okay, what is the majority of Labour's rise? Is it being anti-Tory or is it being pro-Labour? And I think it's fair to say that more of it is anti-Tory than it is pro-Labour. Okay, and that's why you see Labour's leads on other issues beyond party popularity as somewhat markedly lower. State of the nation. Proportion of Britons who say this has got worse since 2010. The majority of Britons say almost everything has got worse since 2010. Immigration, the cost of living, the economy, NHS, our armed forces, notable figure, and since, of course, we've had the D-Day furore. And of course, Britain's standing in the world. The vast majority of Britons say that things have got worse since 2010. 2010, the year that conservative messaging pumped out, was saying we are 24 hours away from being like Greece. Okay? 29 Conservatives, the Tory base says the same, especially on immigration, on the cost of living, absolutely, on the NHS, absolutely. And half of the Tory base says Britain's standing in the world has got worse since 2010. Does the decision to leave the European Union have something to do with that? Well, I would actually be keen to see what 29 Conservatives think. Actually, that would be very interesting. Now, we had the debates this year. We had the leaders' debates this week on, what day was it? Tuesday. My God, it really has been a long week, and I don't know if you noticed, my voice is already getting that little bit croaky. We had the debates. One debate between Rishi Sunak and Keir Starmer. Who won? Well, the snap poll done for Sky News by YouGov found Sunak lead Starmer by 1 point, or a virtual dead heat. But when you have a virtual dead heat, when you are behind on every other metric, you can call that a win. I suppose you definitely could call that a win. And I said the same when Jeremy Corbyn tied with Boris Johnson back in 2019. He was behind Johnson on party popularity, on Brexit, on the economy, and even on likeability, though Johnson himself wasn't that well liked as well. But Corbyn tied with Johnson on who won the first leaders' debate, and it didn't matter a jot, did it? So yeah, take your pick of which pollster you prefer. JL Partners gave the first debate a 20-point lead for Sir Keir Starmer. Savanta, formerly Comres, gave it a 5-point lead for Keir Starmer, and YouGov gave it a 1-point lead for Rishi Sunak. Dead heat or Labour lead. Best on the economy, cost of living, YouGov and Savanta both give it to Labour, both give it to Starmer. Best on immigration, Savanta gives it to Starmer. YouGov give it to Sunak by 3 points. And the one that the Tories are wanting to go very hard on, perhaps the only message they have, tax. It was noticed by YouGov, all right, which perhaps may colour the fact, they have a 1-point lead, gave a 1-point lead to Sunak. So how representative this is, I do not know, but the person perceived as best able on tax is Sunak, not Starmer, by 21 points, according to YouGov. That seems, well, when I heard it, when I saw it, I thought this could do something. I'm not sure if it will now, but I'm still keeping my options open because it's something that resonates, okay? It resonates with voters. If voters think it's true, they will listen. They will listen. They will feel like, oh, I believe in that. Yeah, he's talking sense there. He's probably right. Okay, I don't like him, but he's probably right, so I'll give it a listen. It's like when you talk about immigration. You talk about your town is over full. It's too much pressure, so on and so forth. If it sounds right, people will listen to it. It's why UKIP got such a fair hearing in 2015. Okay. Whether or not the £2,000 tax rise for your household is a lie or not, and it is, according to a whole litany of people, I think is pretty irrelevant. Because is it believable? Now, the public view on whether this is true or false. Labour will raise taxes by £2,000 on average per person if they win the general election. 34% of Britons believe that's true. 38% believe it's false. 28% are unsure. Now, of course, the vast majority of Labour voters, current Labour voters, will say that's false. They don't expect that to happen. But for 1 in 3 of us to think it is true, and for almost 3 in 10 of us think not really know, not really have a clue, is interesting. And note, current undecided voters, a slim plurality think it's true, but the vast majority, or rather just a majority, don't really know. If it sounds right, it can be seen as right, okay? And that's why I have a fear that Sunak and the Conservatives are going to wheel this out again and again and again. And whether if it may discredit them. It may discredit them. Voters may cotton on to the fact that it's not true, and they may start believing otherwise. But again, I have to reiterate, the proportion of Britons who pay attention to the news is, all the time, is pretty low. The average Briton spends about 5 minutes of attention a week. If this is all they hear, maybe they'll start believing it. Maybe they'll start changing their vote accordingly. That, I think, is the hope from Team Sunak, from CCHQ. I think that really is. I think that really is the only hope they have. Well, I actually think if going further right actually might be their route back, but yeah. But nevertheless, the current numbers: Labour 455, a landslide by any metric. The Conservatives 86 seats, 86 seats, the worst result for them in the party's history ever. How do you come back from that? 4 weeks to go. 4 weeks to go, and I don't know how you come back from that. I'm now starting to believe, could the polls be wrong? Is there a shy Tory vote? And there could be. The favourability, the public perception of the Conservatives is so low, so drastically low, that it might, send some people shying away from admitting they're Conservative voters. But when you do online polling, which is what most polls are you really going to be shy in front of a computer screen? I don't think you are. You would be shy on a telephone, but yeah. So there we go. 22-point lead for the Labour Party with 4 weeks to go, less than 4 weeks to go, 27 days to go. Could the polls change? Well, bear this in mind. The current forecast, and this is one of the more extreme ends of the forecast, it's a consequence of Reform's rise. The current forecast has Labour on course for 455 seats. But you have to bear in mind, every poll, there is a margin for error. I've said it before, I'll say it again. When you do a science test in primary school, how many times do you do the science test? You don't do it once, you do it 3 times. Why? Because there is a risk of error in that one and only test. And you're only doing one poll here. You're only doing one poll, so that's why you should have a range of reasonable probability. That's why you have a margin for error. So, current polls point to Labour on 22 points ahead. It's not unreasonable to think that it could be 19 points ahead or 18 points ahead. I'm still sure there will be a narrowing. I'm sure of it, and yet it's really hard to believe that the polls haven't changed. But as a consequence, you need to bear in mind that when you look at these numbers, the Labour probable range of reasonable probability for the Labour Party is winning between 390 seats and 480. I suppose. That's what the current polls point to right now, I suppose. So, the range of possibility for the Conservatives is a defeat on the scale of 1997 or oblivion. Electoral annihilation, the likes of which this historic, great in historic terms, party has ever seen. Well then, how do you come back from that 4 weeks to go? How does Rishi Sunak come back from that 4 weeks to go? That decision to call the election seems like the worst decision in the Conservative Party's history, doesn't it? But there we are. So that probably concludes the briefing I need to give. I think we'll do this again. We'll do a Q&A next time, I hope. Pull me up if I don't. But yeah, that probably concludes it. There's not much more to say here. Over the past few weeks, nothing has changed. Farage's arrival has only made the situation worse for the Conservatives. It looks like Farage could pull off a sensational win in Clacton. He might also see his the leader he replaced, like Georgy Malenkov and Nikki Khrushchev. The leader he replaced might also win the seat of Boston and Skegness as well. Yeah. My God, what on earth is happening? That probably concludes it. 22-point lead for Labour. Nothing has changed. Starmer's favourables are improving a little bit, not by much, but a little bit. Reform's numbers are up. The Greens are staying stock still, I note. They aren't being squeezed, I don't think. Let me just look back at that, yeah? Let me just be sure of this. Yeah, really, they haven't seen a significant squeeze since the election was called. Yeah, actually. Not bad going there for them. What could that mean? Well, we need to have a look at what it means in places like Bristol and Brighton. What is going on with the vote there? I need to find some data, basically. So I'm going to go searching for data and see if I can add it to the model, see if it can change the dynamic a little bit, because the talk of the town in Bristol, at least, is that the Greens are probably going to get it. But who knows? And let's not forget, Jeremy Corbyn is standing as an independent. Will he win? I wrote a few weeks ago that he could. Based on former popular incumbents, he could get around 30-something% of the vote. And then I got a text from someone saying Labour's conceded already. I'm not sure if that's true or not, but that seems to be an impression, at least. What else? George Galloway, gorgeous George in Rochdale. Can he do it again? I made this point on the New Statesman podcast, which I strongly recommend you listen to. They're putting out some great content there. I'm not always on. I've only been on twice now. We did a recording today, and I did make the point that he's good at turning out angry voters. He's really good at that. Let's be honest, he is a superb rabble-rouser. He's one of the better political communicators this country has in recent time. Him, Farage, and who else for talking, for communicating with the country. And he brings out angry voters, but not all voters are angry. Not all voters are motivated by the one issue that he is motivating people on. Tough ask for him, so I don't think he can do it. But again, never say never. Does the fact Labour will win this quite convincingly? Will it change the dynamic in other seats in which people can go searching? Don't know. I would say the fact most people don't pay attention to politics, and though we are all aware there's a general election, and though only 50% of us think Labour will win the election, 50 plus now, I do wonder, actually, if the idea that people go searching, the idea that, Labour's going to win big, so vote for me, vote Indie, vote Green, I don't think it will matter quite so much, really. But anyway, that probably concludes it. I am finishing. I'm tired. My voice is breaking. I'm going to go for a walk. I need some lunch, actually. But there we go. Right. Thank you very much for watching. Give me a follow at BritainAlex on Twitter. You can find us on Facebook as well, if that's your medium. I know people of advanced age prefer Facebook. Have a go. Enjoy it. It's where, by the way, where all the advertising is going, the political party advertising is going. The Conservatives were, until recently, pumping a hell of a lot of money into Facebook advertising. They've stopped recently for some reason. But Labour are pumping a hell of a lot more money in. My advice to anyone, any campaigner, is don't waste your money on, Insta ads, YouTube even, or indeed TikTok. Go in on Facebook and nowhere else, because that's where the actual voters live. The people on the people on TikTok are Britons, yes. They do watch your content, yes, but they're not voting. And the way to turn people out of election time it's not advertising. You got to find a different way to do it, and we do need to talk about that, actually. But anyway, right, that's it. I'm tired. I'm off. Thank you very much for watching. See you in the next one. Labour lead, 22 Labour lead, 22 points. On the economy, 14 points. Starmer's lead over Sunak, 11 points. Starmer's own net favourables, 4 points. Current forecast, Labour, 450-something seats. Conservatives, 80-something. Lib Dems, 60-something. Reform, 1. Green, 1. SNP, 20-something. What on earth is going on in this country? I'll see you in the next one. Thank you for watching.